For our examples, my biggest hint is to memorize the chart and work backwards. Do you know what I mean by work backwards on the chart? Okay, so normally when we use the chart, we say, let's find the sine of 30. So if you have it memorized, or if you're looking at it, you'd say, okay, look at the sine of 30 degrees, and the answer is 1/2. But today, what are we doing? We're going backwards. We're going backwards. So you're finding the ratio on the chart instead, and then figuring out which angle it is. So it's still helpful to have it memorized, but you're going backwards, huh? So it's just going to be quadrant 1 and 2, or quadrant 1 and 4. And the ones you're thinking of that repeat, like for 30 and 60, yeah, for 30 and 60, it's just that you have to pay attention to whether it's sine or cosine to know which angle it is. I mean, yeah, they're all unique. It works. Okay, so let's find exact values. We already kind of did this one today. Inverse sine of 1/2. Only let's do radians as much as possible. Actually, the book will generally tell you how to give your answers. Find exact values from -pi/2 to pi/2, or something like that. They will tell you in the question whether you're supposed to use degrees or radians, and they use radians a lot. Degrees sometimes. Okay. So what would be the radian value of the inverse sine of 1/2? Pi/6. And is that the only answer? Yes, because we restricted the range, and so normally there would be infinitely many answers, but we just go with this one because, and that's the answer your calculator would give you, only as a decimal. Okay, let's use a little bit different notation. Arcsine of -√3/2. Now remember, if the ratio is positive, it's going to be quadrant 1, always. If the ratio is negative, it'll either be quadrant 2 or quadrant 4, depending on which function. So sine, which quadrant is sine? Quadrant 4. So we have a negative ratio, so we're looking for an angle in quadrant 4, but we just listed as a negative angle is what we do. So which angle would normally be √3/2? 60, or I'm asking for radians, so pi/3, but because the ratio is negative, we want the angle in quadrant 4, which is -pi/3. There's kind of a lot of I think there's a lot of problems on today's assignment because they're all just these little quick things. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. Okay, now let's use a calculator. Approximate in degrees using a calculator. You did this in section 1.5 and on your last test. So if I ask you to find the find alpha if the sine of alpha is 0.88, what does that mean you're going to do in your calculator to find that answer? Yeah, so you would use the calculator to do the inverse sine of 0.88. Now, the answer says find in degrees, so what do you need to make sure your mode is listed in? Degree mode. Be careful of that. You're going to have to switch back and forth again. Okay, so you can use your iPod for these if you want to use the calculator that you turn sideways. What did you get? I don't have an answer written down, so I'm just kind of going with your 61.64. Okay, I guess I should have said to the nearest 10th. So 61.6, does that work? Okay, let's try a -1 just for fun. Inverse sine of -0.27. First of all, predict what kind of answer your calculator is going to give you. If you plug in a negative ratio, you're going to get out a negative angle. Yeah. What'd you get? Negative 15.6 degrees. Anybody agree? Okay. Round it properly. Thank you. Okay, good. Okay, let's just do a few exact ones that are cosines. I'm going to skip some of these because I think you get the idea. Inverse cosine of negative 1. Yeah, remember how if it's cosine, your negative answers will actually be positive angles in the second quadrant. No. Pi. Yep. Okay, try this one. Arc cosine of, let's do, well, this one's negative square root of 2 over 2, just to make sure we understand the negative stuff. If it's negative and it's cosine, it's in what quadrant? It's a positive angle in the second quadrant. It's a 45-degree reference angle, yes, but that's not the right answer. Because of the negative, it has to be a second quadrant answer. Negative 45 is a fourth quadrant answer. $135. I prefer you to answer 3 pi fourths. Don't forget. So that one's a tricky one. Not negative 45 degrees because it's in quadrant 2. That's where it's defined. Remember, we just talked about where they're defined. Quadrant 2. Okay, let's just experiment with these on our calculator. So cosine of alpha equals 0.23. Let's do approximate for these. So in your calculator, so you're going to do the inverse cosine of 0.23, which is, I don't know, so tell me. 76.7 degrees. Okay. Or if you wanted to find the inverse cosine of negative 0.82. Now remember when we plugged negatives in our calculator for sine, we got negative answers because it was quadrant 4. What kind of answers do you think you're going to get when you plug a negative into a cosine? A positive quadrant 2 answer. So you should be expecting an answer between 90 and 180. See how you can use those types of things to help you check your answer, check your work? Because that has to be in the correct quadrant. Okay. Tangent again is like secant or like sine. It's in quadrant 1 and 4. So you plug in a positive, you get a positive answer. You plug in a negative, you get a negative answer in quadrant 4. Okay? Just kind of skip tangents because I really want to move on to secants and cosecants because they're the confusing ones. Cotangents are the especially confusing ones. Those are the ones we need to focus on the most, is cotangents. Okay, I'm going to stop.